So I'm going to interrupt your dessert, and we're going to overlay some presentations and some stories as you're having your dessert and your coffee. So the first person I'd like to welcome up is John Kelly of the Department of Energy. Please.
Oh, that's your speech? Okay, good. Okay, so thank you so much for inviting me to be here tonight. And, I'm here on behalf of the Department of Energy to give the best wishes to Neil Todreas on his 80th or 81st birthday, whatever. But this symposium is so important to us at Department of Energy and Nuclear Engineering. So anyway, I don't want to belabor the point, but Neil, we have a couple of things to give you. I'm a geek delivering gifts, so I'm not a Greek delivering. The first is a letter from the Secretary of Energy to you, which I think you already received, but we had it framed, so you can put it on your wall. So I'll see if I can read this. I'll probably synopsize it, okay? So on the behalf of the Department of Energy, I would like to congratulate you on your distinguished career. And really, Neil, from the heart, that's my words. You embody a combination of skills as a nuclear science and engineering educator, researcher, and ambassador. Your contributions and support for the advancement of nuclear energy have had a significant impact on the nuclear energy community. As a teacher, advisor, mentor to hundreds of students, many of them in the room tonight, over the past 40 years, you have helped guide the careers of many who have since assumed key roles in governments, such as myself, okay, and others here tonight. So thank you, Neil. In addition, your contributions to academia, you supported the nuclear energy community in many other ways. You served as a member of the Department of Energy's advisory committees on nuclear energy issues for over 14 years, including the committee that oversaw the development of the Generation 4 nuclear energy systems roadmap that me and Frank, sitting next to you, have been very wedded to. So thank you for that. You've been named a fellow of the ANS and the ASME, and you started up the thermohydraulics division of the ANS. What a wonderful accomplishment. Your international efforts are equally impressive, including your tenure as the co-chair of the French CEA-DN Science Advisory Committee for over 8 years, and your continuing membership to the present. So it's fair to say that you have had a truly significant and meaningful impact on the advancement of nuclear energy in the U.S. and the world, and it's a great pleasure to extend to you all the best wishes and heart-filled appreciation for all your achievements. So I'll note that this was signed by the Secretary of Energy, Ernest Moniz, and with a couple other personal comments. So Neil, congratulations. In the hopes of not getting too sentimental, another award for Neil. The Distinguished Career Service Award, given from the Department of Energy to Neil. So this was a letter from Secretary Moniz. This is from the Department of Energy. So I'll read this. In recognition of your distinguished career, your friends and colleagues at the Department of Energy, and I mean many of them, thank you, Neil, congratulate you on the occasion of this Center for Advanced Nuclear Energy Systems and the MIT Energy Initiative sponsored symposium on nuclear beyond light water reactors, which is in your honor. Well deserved. You embody a rare combination of skills as a nuclear science and engineering educator, researcher, and ambassador. Your contributions and passionate support for the advancement of nuclear energy have all made a significant impact on the nuclear energy community today. So Neil, congratulations. you already received in the mail.
Get your picture taken.
I'll address this in a few minutes.
This is his turn. So thank you very much, John. And our next speaker is Mike Corradini. Please come up, Mike.
So I was asked to give a few comments. So I have about 20 pages of stuff. So I'm pleased actually able to introduce our honoree and featured dinner speaker. It's a dinner speech, I assume. Very technical, so there'll be a quiz at the end, Professor Todreas. I was also asked to provide some brief comments about Neil from my perspective, having known him since I first met him over 40 years ago. God, heaven forbid. So I spoke with Dennis, department head, and Neil's colleagues about what would be appropriate to say. And I also saw Neil in Europe a few weeks ago when we were dealing with a lovely review of CEA's work. And was to what to emphasize. And so Neil, as I suspected, said something very simple. Keep it short, stupid. However, I'm not one to follow. I'm Italian, so rules are simply guidance. So Neil's achievements and his impact on many of us are really too numerous to mention, and so I'll have a few brief ones. Over 50 years of research and teaching in nuclear engineering and thermal hydraulics and safety. Served over 8 years as department head of the MIT Nuclear Engineering Department. I think that's what it was called then, not Nuclear Science and Engineering. Extensive record of service in government, industry, international committees, many of which we're still on, or you're still on. Author of 3 books, over 250 papers in nuclear engineering-related research. We've already mentioned fellow of ANS, ASME, and member of the National Academy of Engineering. So I could go on and on. A lot of achievements. But important to give you a sense of the person. So I sent a few notes out to colleagues to get a few stories about Neil. And I thought I'd share a few. Now these I'm going to read verbatim. Otherwise, those in the audience will get mad at me, or those that are watching by webinar. We have a webinar. So Ron Ballinger noted. Ron's in Japan. We got rid of Ron. I'm sorry, I didn't say it that way. The best I can do is to discuss the look. You and I grew up where our mothers would give you the look when you had went against her rule set in some way. You knew when you got the look that you were on thin ice. Same with Neil. You and I know him as a teacher, a mentor, a boss, a colleague. There is no person at MIT that I have more respect for. That said, when it looked to him that you were about to deviate from an obligation to him or to an agreed upon path, he would give you the look. No angry outburst, no demeaning words, zero bad air, just the look. It was always enough. He used to use the look very often, but when he did, you sat up, you listened. In every case, once you got the look, you realized, damn, he was right. John Kelly noted, I picked a few from. What I remember is that I knew thermal hydraulics was my calling after I took the class that Neil taught with Peter Griffith, Warren Rosenau. And if you're into the MIT trivia, 2236J. I never knew what the hell J meant. But Neil has always... Whatever. Neil has always been a fantastic mentor and helped me connect the dots. I was so glad he was on our advisory panels since his advice was always spot on. I can't emphasize that personally more. He emphasized the need to have a questioning attitude. There was always a question, and it was always a good question. Jennifer Ewell said, In fact, there was something Jennifer said that I can't say because it's too risque. I've already checked with Carol. It is true, but I can't say it. So Jennifer Yule said, I would note that Neil is the godfather of nuclear engineering. Now, I like that Italian tone. He calls up his old students and somehow he calls in favors. For some reason, we all do whatever he asks. As Al Pacino said in Godfather 3, he drags us back in. I've put together several informational items, have responded to a number of information-seeking emails or phone calls or notes. That's my editorial comment. Of course, we all get dragged back in because we can never repay him for his knowledge, his patience when instructing us and encouraging us. We're very fortunate to have him and had an opportunity to learn from him and work with him. Jacopo noted. This is a long one. I had to put it in smaller font so I could. I first met Neil in '97, soon after I started MIT, when I went to his office and stated I would want to work with him because the thermal hydraulics had been my first love. There's a lot of love going on here. He told me, impress him first by doing well in classes. His exact words were something like, my first challenge to you is get an A in 22-3-12. For those that aren't into the vernacular, that's engineering nuclear systems. I was surprised that he did not give me his immediate confidence. Of course, how could he know that I was okay? I don't know, look at him. He still looks pretty sketchy to me, but 22-3-12 was taught by Mujid then, and I got an A, went back to Neil, he offered me the RA, I eventually completed my PhD, and he was my advisor. Later after teaching, I have to go fast, this is a very long. Later after teaching 22-3-12 myself a few times, I provided Neil with original material for the new edition of his textbook. There's many new editions, I'll editorialize. Once published, they both came to my office, delivered a signed copy of the book, which I still have. I remember that at that moment I felt quite vindicated and redeemed from my initial encounter. Also humbled and grateful for everything that he and Mujid had meant in my professional career. So we can't just do students. Bob Hendry noted. So if you don't know Bob Hendry, Bob is vice president of Fauski & Associates, or was until he retired. So Bob Hendry noted, what a terrific gentleman and educator. We have one thing in common. I didn't know this. Our wives went to the same high school, Shaker Heights, Ohio. Shaker Heights High School in Ohio, a couple of years apart. One compliment that I remember Neil said to me was, I like the way you approach problems. True point. However, if you ask him, he may remember that my suggestion about Carol's back was a very interesting one. We went out to dinner once, and Carol had a lot of back pain. I remember this because we were out once ourselves about talking about this. I also have had back troubles over the years, and I went to the Back Institute in Wheaton, Illinois, where some of the players of the Chicago Bears, we got to come back to the Midwest or else we're not good, to go after they retire for back issues. I sent Carol info on the Institute. She used this to find a practitioner in Boston who performed similar therapy exercise in water. Carol was transformed. You look transformed. And now they are off always hiking in Europe. Frank Correa noted. Now, I should point out that Frank wrote me multiple pages. And so I reduced it, well, okay, 3 or 4, but you had small font. It was down to 2. Understanding, so he had a lot of stories, so I encapsulated into understanding and charismatic, insightful and observant, overarching vision and tremendous expertise, forward-thinking and proactive, all very true. And then he said, I'm very pleased to be invited to MIT CANES event about advanced reactors beyond light water reactors. This celebrates Neil's empathetic dedication to many generations of students, internationally recognized technical expertise, visionary spirit that undoubtedly gave vital impetus to my own career path. And finally, Doug Chapin. If you don't know Doug, he's retired president of NPR. And Doug is a crusty old fellow, if you don't know Doug. And in the Navy terminology, he's just one very crusty old belly button. Doug said, I have known and worked with Neil for many years, many decades. I certainly can remember many times when he firmly got his points and his conclusions across and got folks to get things done. Never nasty, but clear, firm, and effective. And so, with my own thinking process on this, he said he's truly an outstanding scholar, a leader, and a gentleman, a true gentleman. Neil.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Mike. So, I have to say that being an MC at dinners was not part of the dean's list of duties when I signed up to become department head, but here we go. So it might seem funny coming from the department head, but seeing a lot of you out here and talking to you and hearing all these old stories, I'm like the newcomer at MIT because I've only been here for 10 years. I won't say where I came from, Wisconsin, because it's usually not a good idea to antagonize one of your speakers. Sorry, Mike. Anyway, back to my arrival. I distinctly recall conversations I had at my Midwest previous institution, where colleagues really detailed what a nasty place MIT was going to be. Everybody was going to be quite mean and harsh and so forth. Okay, and no, that wasn't you, Mike, I admit. Okay, that wasn't you. Anyway, so I arrive at MIT for my first faculty lunch. We're in the conference room, introduced to the NSE faculty, and a grizzled veteran of fission sits beside me at lunch. And he looks over, "You work in fusion?" "Yeah, I'm really pumped up. Work in fusion, yeah." "It won't work." So, of course, I stepped right into it. I said, well, actually, don't worry. I think we've really found some great solutions for ITER. Yes, I said that. Oh, so naive. And then he just paused, and he leans over to me and goes, "The blanket, it won't work." I just shut up at that point. I looked straight ahead at the north wall of the conference room, and I looked to find out which previous department head I was sitting beside. It wasn't you, Neil. It wasn't you. It was not you. Okay. So after the faculty lunch, I actually went up to the north wall and looked at the conference room, and it's literally on the north wall and are lined up all of the previous department heads. And I'm looking at this, the pictures here. I mean, oh my, Manson Benedict, Norm Rasmussen, Neil Todreas, Mujib Kazmi, and I'm like giants of fission. And I'm just sort of like, oh, wow, like what am I doing here? But then I felt a little bit better because I kept going to the right and just like, oh, what are fusion people doing as faculty, doing as department heads? Jeff Freiberg, Ian Hutchinson. Okay. So I went back and I looked at Neil's photograph, and I realized when you became department head, I was running around my high school in rural Saskatchewan trying to find somebody to teach me calculus. And I thought, I really feel like I'm out of my depth here. But like I said, despite these disturbing trends, I decided to stay. So in retrospect now, having become department head, I sort of think about the characteristics of the different department heads that we've had. And sort of the characteristics they need to succeed. So Mujib, I think, was speak softly and raise lots of money. So I think I'm good at maybe half of that, okay, right? For those who know Mujib very well. Okay, Jeff Freiberg. Well, so I just say, he should be the one up here emceeing. Because who's better at telling jokes during dinners than Jeff Freiberg? I'm not even going to go into that class. And Ian Hutchinson, have an impressive accent that makes you sound really smart. The problem is Canadians don't have that, eh?
No way, eh?
No way, eh? Yeah. And finally, what can I say about Richard? Well, I say I'm not happy with his precedent for two reasons. So first of all, he remodeled the conference room, and I remember arriving, and this is a few years ago, and we arrived, and he had repainted the place, and the department head pictures are now back up on the wall, and they were going all the way through, and right there, right beside Ian Hutchinson's portrait, I swear, was a nail in the wall ready for Richard's picture. And I looked over at Richard and I said, "You're not going anywhere, are you, Richard?" Well, we know what happened there. And I will point out another thing that I'm very upset about, by the way, is that if you look at the wall, and many of you will be in the conference room tomorrow, look at the wall, there is no more place on the wall for the next ex-department head. Thank you, Richard, for making me eternal department head. Okay, so anyway, back to, so look, I'm very happy I stayed, even after that first interesting comment, which actually sparked me onto some interesting things. But really, what really happened was I actually really found that the department was in fact highly collegial, very collaborative, really a wonderful place to work with students and colleagues. And this brings me back to the department head that was on the left side of the wall, Neil, who served as eight and change years as department head. I got to interact with Neil directly. No, he didn't switch to Fusion because he's in good health. You can see that, very good. But I really enjoyed working with you in terms of mentoring students. Students sometimes are having troubles, but also serving on search committees where I think we got to hire some of our spectacular new faculty. And in fact, I see one of them right over there. And through this, I really saw how Neil, set an example. You can really have the highest technical and scientific standards. You don't relax those, but you can still be someone who respects the opinions and the feelings of others. So in Canada, and I'm not sure if they say this in the United States, is that when someone does something nice to you, it's usually getting you the next beer, you say, "You are a scholar and a gentleman." Well, in Neil, I think we really have those two combinations together. So organizations like academic departments are not entities that sort of stand by themselves. They're really reflections of the people who lead them. And I know that highly collegial and collaborative ethos of our department has a lot to do with you Neil. Not just your time as department head, but your time as a faculty member. So really, I would say for making it that kind of department, thank you, and I'll try my best to keep it going. So I would just like you to raise your glasses, please, to Neil Todreas, a scholar and a gentleman. Yeah. I did bring my glasses. Cheers, Neil. Home tonight. So Neil, would you please come up and say a few words? Yes.
Whoa. Well, you guys are in for a treat. After today, you ought to be very happy I have no slides. For those of you who weren't at the session, you know the problems with slides were forever ago. That's the good side. The bad side, though, is there was so much said this afternoon and a little bit tonight that I feel I have to give some response in different ways. So I actually have three themes for you. First, thank yous, and I'll expand on those. Second, a little bit about myself that most of the students don't know and will have a little interest in. And then finally, what do I really think about advanced reactors? So if you bear with me, I'll keep it bounded, but I do have a few things to say. But first, I wanted to just talk about the event. The event for me is not so much focused on me, but it's really a reflection of the ethos and the camaraderie of the department. This started with Manson Benedict and carried on throughout up till today. And you see it among the joking back and forth among the faculty and with the students, as you'll hear. And second, this event and the symposium is also a reflection of what Richard Lester brought into the department, which is a focus on the future, innovation, new ideas, breadth of technology. And for that, we ought to be very thankful that he pushed and introduced that into us. Then with regard, I want to say thanks to a number of you. I can't say thanks individually to all the alumni, but there are a few people here from far away. Fong Li and his wife from China. John Batsis from Greece. Hisashi Ninokata from Japan, but Italy too. He's at Polimi. Carlos Villanueva from Mexico, not too far, but very, very welcome. And Frank Correa from France. All these people just have flown in for a day, for an evening, and they're going back, but for them, I'm really grateful. In addition, my first PhD student is here. I don't know where Frank Golder is. He's here. Frank is still working in the Department of Energy. He's the guy. He's the guy who picked up and is driving the accident-tolerant fuel program. We met when I first went to, after MIT, and I went to Washington. I started teaching at Catholic University. I didn't have enough work during the day, so I went there for evening school. And Frank was a graduate student there. We met and ran through his thesis together. Of course, we're close friends now. The age difference shrinks as you get older. And then, to balance Frank, my latest PhD student is here. Oogie is here. I have to look. Oogie's name is Unga Baja Atgon Bhakta. Oogie, I think, is the second student at MIT from Mongolia. Not the first, but the second. Yeah, I got it right. Oogie graduated in August of this year. We did a research project for EDF. EDF's got bigger problems, but we did a project that is. But if they pick up, the efficiency of their plants will increase. Now, you're sure to pick that up. Oogie, to the promise of Exelon, I was trying to think of the right word here, is working in the advanced R&D strategic side of Exelon. And he'll do a great job there. He's not going to go back to Mongolia anytime soon. And then I want to thank the Symposium speakers for accepting and coming. And I definitely want to thank the evening speakers, Dennis, John Kelly. By the way, John Kelly was Mujib's student, not my student, but since I was Mujib's advisor, John's my grandson. And Mike Cordini. Mike was actually, when he came, Mujib and I worked closely together with Mike. And then the organizers of the evening are Jacopo, thank you particularly, as if he doesn't have enough to do. Pavel, who was here, will be here tomorrow. Mike Cordini, John Parsons, Dave Petty, and Regis Matzi. And Additionally, the reason we're here tonight is because Mujid would not take no for an answer from me. He was kind of determined to have an evening like this. I miss him terribly. But we're here tonight because of Mujid's foresight and his persistence. And additionally, I thank Nazik for being here with us. Thank you. And then finally, in terms of people, there's two professionals who I worked with on sabbaticals, and back in the LMFBR days when I was working on fast reactors, Jean-Pierre Banquet from EDF Research at the time, now he's an executive type, and Ko Namakawa from Toshiba. They are both here this evening from afar. And I'll finish thank yous by thanking and introducing my son, Ian, who's here with us. And of course, Carol, who's over here. Without their support and their being behind me, helping me, giving me time, encouraging me, things wouldn't have worked out the way they did. So, with that, let me just tell you a few personal things here. I was not destined to be a technologist or a scientist or anything. My father was in the retail business, and I spent all my formative high school years working in these stores, selling cash register, stock, everything that prepared me for nuclear engineering. My parents immigrated just at the beginning of the Depression. My father from the border of the Ukraine and Poland, and my mother was originally from Moldavia, but then moved to Istanbul, where she lived for 17 years. And then they came to the United States. They came separately, met in New York, didn't know any English. Came about 1930. I was born in 35. The house I grew up in was a polyglot of language. English was not dominant among them. But when I started school, then there became a rule that all the Russian, all the Yiddish, all the French, all the German that my mother had picked up in Istanbul stopped. And so to this day, my wife speaks French and I speak only English. But the reason I'm telling you this story is because I've been really focused on making theses well written. And students probably thought I had an Oxford education with English. But like a lot of faculty I know who were not American focused, English focused, we learned English more than those guys who were English focused, grew up in English schools. So you guys who I gave such a hard time on your thesis, just remember that I had to learn it as hard as you did. And I was particularly tough on the Italians Actually, not particularly Jacopo, but a few others, because in Italy, when they go through school, not only they have to do the scientific stuff and lay it out, but they have to elaborate. So I was continually cutting to the annoyance of those students. And so I'll just, on this side, just say, although I'm still working with students, I focused on undergraduates of late. And I've got 3 undergraduates here I just want to recognize. The first in particular is Tot. Is he here? Is Tom here?
Yeah,
Okay, Tom. Tot is a Vietnamese student. I went to Mike Short's wife today to ask her how to pronounce his full name. But due to the fact I didn't have any of the accents or anything, she couldn't pronounce it either. So I'll leave it at Todd. But he's a student now at Michigan. Tom Downer is his advisor. And Tom made it a point to bring him to MIT tonight, but somehow we lost him at the... Anyway, this student is brilliant. And he's going to make Tom look really good. Then the 2 guys who are making me look good are Andres. Is he here? Andres Alvarez, who I've been working with since he was a freshman. He's a senior now. And then Jared Conway, sitting just in front of him. Jared is a sophomore now. We have a lot of good times together. And I look forward to seeing their development. So that brings me to the nub of the discussion. The subject of the symposium is beyond light water reactors, but as you see, as I talk here, I'm into advanced reactors, non-light water reactors, but I have not completely drop the need for and the focus on light water reactors. How could I? I grew up in naval reactors. I spent a lot of time working with Zach Payton and INPO on light water reactors. And the future for advanced reactors cannot go forward unless we have a solid, firm reactor base. And that base is based on light water reactors. So don't get too focused on advanced non-light water reactors. Save some effort and some support to hold our base together. You can't build a house unless you have a foundation. Now, some people expected probably that I'd pick some winners tonight among advanced reactors. I liked what Pete Lyons did today in terms of 3 categories of factors. And I thought his grouping was right. The focus I decided to go on is to organize the future through missions. I think the winners among advanced reactors are going to be those that best meet missions, but missions prioritized. And there's 4 missions I see for advanced reactors now. And the first one is what we spent a lot of time talking about today, which was electricity production, but economic electricity production. It's not just the capital cost. That's what it costs you, but the balance is what you can bring in in terms of revenue from their operating reactor. And we know that with renewables and how they've affected the demand, the cost function or the price function for electricity varies greatly with time, 24-hour time. So Charles Forsberg, in my mind, has introduced a design objective to reactors that we didn't have before. And that design objective is design something that can follow the load curve and the price curve for electricity. We've always just designed reactors to supply just base load. Of course, they do that well, and we got to continue to have that capability. But Charles has taken his concept and made it responsive to following the price curve and to bring in the revenue. I think that's a key insight. I think that's one way and one new way to go after producing economic nuclear power. And that mission, I think, is the prime mission. The second mission is other products, and that is process heat and perhaps transportation fuels, because we got to break into those markets too. I was seared, though, in that discussion, or in that focus. Mike and I, when we served on NERAC, I guess it was, we were dealing with the new production reactor, next generation reactor. And there was a utility, not a utility, an industry consortium led by Dow Chemical that was getting together with government to advance the high temperature gas reactor, which of course could meet it. But that effort was stymied because industry was willing to put up 50% of the money, but only when government secured a license for the plant, solved the regulatory impasse. Then Dow and industry would come along and put in their money for the prototype and future development. And so I think high temperature reactors, gas is the highest, which has this capability to develop other products and sell other products, is a mission second to electric generation directly. But we're stymied on this because we need industry with government, but we need them together timed at the right sequence. And we haven't broken that knot yet. The other, there's two other missions. One is spent fuel management, and the other is plutonium disposition. And I thought what I heard today from the speakers in this was right. If you get into spent fuel management, that's code word for closed cycle versus open cycle. If we go to a closed cycle, which is a technologist's dream, it's a nightmare for actually implementing and achieving it. Because the implementation, at least in the United States, requires the industry, which is the utility industry, to buy into a very complex fuel cycle, which now they have no incentive to do because the government has promised to handle their spent fuel through direct disposal. So it'd be very nice technologically to move in this direction. The requirement is no separated plutonium, and safety in fuel cycle facilities and also in the reactor. But there's, in my mind, there's no strong imperative for this, although I like it as a technologist. And finally, plutonium disposition is very important in certain locations in the world. The UK and likely in Japan now, because their FAST program has gone down. They've got separated plutonium. So there's a role for reactors that can do plutonium disposition in those locations, but it's not a global location. Fast reactors, as Pete was we're talking about today, moving on a little. Fast reactors are nice because they have low power, low pressure, and somewhat high temperature. Those are nice attributes, but they turn around and make the difference relative to emissions. I'm not sure myself. I'm more with him. So let me finish with the point that John Deutsch was talking about, the development time for reactors. The reason I think reactor development, advanced reactors, is going to take a lot of time and should, is because time after time we've learned that incubation time for materials problems takes many, many years. Graphite reactors, due to shrinkage and swelling, these problems didn't show up for tens of years. In the AGR and the Magnox reactors, in the German reactors. In the sodium or in the fast reactors, we had swelling of structures, structural materials. That didn't show up right away. Water reactors, intergranular stress corrosion cracking, we had it in the Navy program right at the beginning, the late 50s. We're still dealing with it in different attributes, different ways. And then finally, in the salt reactor, that's to be determined, salt coolant, but I am very much afraid of salt fueled. Pete talked about dissolved fuel. Those are interesting words. I didn't hear those before, but salt fueled reactor, I don't think that's safe. Anytime you have movable radio or reactive fuel and it can move around, boy, you've got an additional dimension. And also, the molten salt reactor at Oak Ridge operated, or was built and operated for 4 years. It operated at power for a year and a half. It was shut down, and we never looked inside at the decommissioning time to find the problems. But the leading technologist at Oak Ridge, who I spoke to, told me there were plenty, and salt-fueled complicates salt-cooled reactors. So let's stay with salt-cooled reactors for a long time.
The DOE folks cannot find.
Okay, so finally, you know I'm a real Rickover supporter. I just wanted to point out, Rickover wrote a paper in '53, which he talked about paper reactors and real reactors. Most of you are familiar with that. I won't repeat it. But tucked in his listing there, he said, the practical reactor requires immense amount of development on apparently trivial items, chief among them corrosion in particular is a problem. So it is going to take us time with these advanced reactors when we build the prototypes and operate them to find out what we're really getting into. And we ought to take the time to find that out. So I'll just close and thank you that I'm optimistic about the future with advanced non-light water reactors. I think we've got to stay with light water reactors and build a firm base to put them on. But I think we've got to be cautious. I'm very happy that we got a lot of young people here. Not all the alumni are young, though, but there's younger students. But I'm happy that they will build on this new vision for reactor future. And I hope they'll heed the wisdom of past experience, but still retain the spirit of innovation and discovery and move out unhindered by fear that all these problems in the past are potent problems to reoccur and need to be solved. So with that, I thank you all for being here, for all the good wishes you've given me. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, having further discussions, and make sure you interact and meet people who you haven't met before, because there's a lot of smart people out in front of me. Thank you very much.